everyone. Welcome to our town hall meeting, and thank you for taking the time to check in with us and see what's happening here at Red Deer Lake United Church. We're really excited to share with you some of the things that have been happening and a little bit about the direction that we're going to be heading, although that's a bit of a work in progress. There's so much to celebrate, and Nick will be focusing on that and updating you on the things that are so wonderful and that are happening in our church that are important for us to celebrate. I've also have Mike Jackson who's with us today, and Mike is here to give a little bit of information about the finances. It's been a bit of a year in terms of trying to keep us financially afloat. So really appreciate Mike's work with that. And so first of all, I'm going to turn you over to Nick, and he's going to start with some of the celebrations.
Hey friends, it is Nick here, and I want to take some time in this little video to do something we haven't done explicitly in a long time, but something that we have to do all the time as spiritual people, and that's celebrate. Because here's the thing, if our faith is all about growing, if it's all about moving, if it's coming closer and closer to wholeness and transformation, about becoming the kinds of people that God calls us to be, then celebration is a necessary and essential part of it. Because celebration is what happens when you look back on where you've been and see that you're somewhere new. That you've actually have grown, that you've made some changes, that you've grown, that you've learned, that you've failed and gotten up again, that you've experienced resurrection. Yeah, that's how you mark the movement. It's how you find the joy, the energy, the resilience, the resolve, the perseverance, whatever it is that you need to not just celebrate it and see that you've moved, but also to look ahead and see, hey, let's keep going. Let's keep doing this. We can do this, so let's not stop now. And I want to take some time to celebrate with you today because, hey, we have a lot to celebrate. There has been a lot of movement and growth and learning and becoming that has taken place here at the church over the past 15 months. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that. To take a bit of time to look back and name some things. Name not everything, because we don't have 24 million hours. But name a few things, some big general things that we should be really proud of, that we should be celebrating. And through it all, hopefully find what we need, the courage and the resilience, the rest, whatever we need to look at, hey, what's next? What are the big questions we have to rumble with now? Where are we going after this? And so I want you to lean into this with me. I want you to celebrate along with me. You can do it all in the comments or just in your living room or office, wherever you are, because this is good stuff. This is important stuff. And we have 4 or 5 that I want to lift up today. We're going to begin with this. We are still here. Yeah, we're still here. After 15 months of doing online church, after 15 months of having everything changed, we're still here. And that's something to celebrate, because not only are so many churches not still here, a lot of our fellow communities didn't have the capacity to keep on going. They didn't have the resources to move through all this. They chose to close down or even close completely. But for us, we chose to step into this. We were fortunate and privileged to have the resources, and we did what it takes to still be here. 15 months plus later, we're still here. We are still alive. We're even more alive than we were then. And that is something we need to celebrate, because that's a triumph. That is a feat. That is amazing. We made it. We navigated the pandemic safely and faithfully, and we are still here. And so let's give it up for that one. That needs to be celebrated. I am so proud of us for still being here and being the kind of church that we are now. Yeah, definitely a huge one that we need to celebrate. All right, number 2. The second thing we need to celebrate is that we learned to connect in new ways. We learned to connect in new ways. One of the hardest things about the past 15 months in terms of our church life was that everything that we knew, all the ways to connect with God, each other, and ourselves that were familiar to us, were gone. We couldn't do them. Virtually every single thing that we love to do together, we couldn't do. But here's the thing that we need to celebrate. We didn't just throw in the towel. We didn't just insist on doing the old things. We stepped into this new realm and we learned to connect with God, each other, and ourselves in new ways. We learned new skills. We learned new spiritual practices. We learned that God is bigger than the church building. We learned that faith is bigger than Sunday mornings. We learned that we can actually encounter the divine at home as well as at the church. And I think through it all, our spirituality grew. We ourselves grew. We learned just how big that God is. And that is something we need to celebrate because that's growth. That's learning. That's this beautiful awareness that we've gained that I don't think many of us, I certainly didn't have it as much before. And what a wonderful thing to have. What a wonderful thing to celebrate that we learn to connect in new ways. And those are things that we want to hold on to and take with us because we want to make sure we keep growing and not go back to shrinking, right? Yeah, such a good thing to celebrate. So that's number 2. Number 3. Oh yeah, I am so proud of this one. And the third thing we need to celebrate is that we lived out our values. We lived out our values. And I can remember the moment that I became so proud of our church and I could see so much of the work that we have done just manifest and take form. It was March 15th of last year. What we thought would never happen was actually happening. The pandemic was real. It had hit Calgary, and we were trying to figure out, what do we do as a faith community? What's our next step? How do we respond? Some churches were choosing to close. Some churches were choosing to stay open. Some had no idea what to do. And we met as a board. We had a quick phone call. I remember sitting on my bed talking with some board members, and we tried to figure out, well, what's the right thing to do? And it was such a short conversation. I am so proud of the shortness because our board knew that despite the fact that it meant leaving behind things that we knew and loved, despite that it meant giving up things like meeting together on Sunday morning and all these things that gave us life, we knew that the right thing to do, the faithful thing to do, was to choose to love our neighbors and keep everybody safe. We knew that's what our faith calls us to do. That's what Christ calls us to do. And in a very short conversation, we chose to shut everything in person down and go online because we knew that was what God would call us to do. That's what our values dictated. We got to keep loving. We've got to keep being just, even when it's inconvenient, uncomfortable, and means a loss. What a great thing to celebrate. What a wonderful thing to celebrate. We should be so proud of ourselves because of that. Yeah, awesome, right? So good. So that's number 3. Number 4. Oh yeah, we did new things. We did so many new things. Things that not just like learning to exist online, but we did things like care packages. Did you know that Vi's team delivers over 100 care packages each and every month? Yeah, her and Catherine and their team put together this magazine full of sermons and prayers and devotionals, art, poems, letters from the community. And that is the way that we've kept in touch with everyone who couldn't join us online. That was the way we could say, hey, we know you can't join us there, but we still see you. We still love you. You still belong here, and we want to keep that connection strong. And so they make homemade soup. They make gifts. They make flowers, this magazine. And it's this really wonderful new way of being the church together. And I think that is something that we need to celebrate. They did such an amazing job on it, and they deserve all the props that they can get. We also learned new skills. Nobody on staff, and certainly nobody in our volunteers team, knew how to navigate a pandemic. This is not something they taught you in seminary, but we all had to learn new skills. Catherine had to learn how to make music videos. All those music videos you see, those images, that's all her. That's all things she had to learn how to do. Antonina had to learn to record music. Had to take different tracks that people without good technology can make, send it in, and she had to do something to actually make those videos happen. Colleen had to figure out, how do we run a church when the church doesn't actually exist in the building, but exists kind of online and in people's homes? How do we keep people safe? Vi had to help her team adjust to a new way of looking after people. How do we connect safely? What kind of questions are people rumbling with right now? How do we actually care and love for our people in the middle of the worst thing we've all experienced? Yeah, all new things. These were first times for all of us, and as we all know, first time things are tough. But we all chose to do it. We all leaned in. We chose resilience. We chose perseverance. We chose a lot of grace. And we kept on going because we believed in what we were doing and we were willing to try new things. And you guys did new things too. You learned to do church online. You learned to connect in new ways. And so again, all that to say, definitely worth celebrating because new things are tough. New skill sets are tough. But I think it shows our hearts. I think it shows our courage, our perseverance, our resiliency to say, yes, this matters. Church is something that is important to us, and we want to make it happen regardless of whether we can do it inside a building or inside our homes. So big, big thing we need to celebrate. The next thing we have to celebrate is that we have new community. I don't know if you know this because it's hard to tell just from the video, but we have brand new people who have joined us since the pandemic, all of them joining in online. And a lot of these people, not from Calgary. We have a new guy joining us from Calgary and he's joined the programs. He's now helping out at the church and we've opened up this new safe, affirming community for him. And that's such a beautiful and wonderful thing. We have people joining us from the UK. They borrow our music videos. We have people from Ontario who watch and they've downloaded all our church magazines to distribute to their community. We have people watching in Australia. We have people watching from the southern states. And all of these people, they call Red Deer Lake home. Our sense of community is actually expanded. How cool is that? We now have a reach that we never would have had before. That's a gift that the pandemic has given us. We now have a bigger community to be a part of, and that is such a beautiful and wonderful thing. Definitely something that we need to celebrate. And the final thing that I think we need to celebrate, even though, like I said, there's so much more that we won't name here, but I think this one is really important. I think this is a testament to you, the congregation, and it's something that we don't name enough. We need to celebrate that we were real. That we were real. Because the temptation, and I felt this too, when this all happened, was to go to comfort and nostalgia. When everything had to change, we had to go all online and we were feeling all kinds of dread, languish, existential exhaustion, all those things that we were dealing with. The temptation was, I think for a lot of us, was to go back to something that was familiar, that was safe, that was comforting. Oh, let's just do the safe, comforting things, the things that are fun, and let that distract us from all the hard stuff. That was a temptation. But instead of doing that, as a community, we chose to be real. We chose to talk about it. We chose to ask big, difficult questions about it. Not just about the pandemic, but also about the anti-racism movements and what that meant for us as a largely white community. How do we respond to that? How does this pandemic change our faith? How does that actually shape the questions that we need to ask ourselves? How do we live well even in this? Yeah, big questions. And I'm so proud that we chose to be a church that's real, that doesn't shy away from difficult questions, that chooses to be curious and try to have a faith that can hold even all of this. Yeah, definitely something to celebrate. And I'll do one more, even though I know Benita's going to speak to this and we'll speak to this later on. We need to celebrate our amazing staff and our amazing volunteers. I can tell you for a fact that we would not be here without them. That this is not something one person can do, but this was a huge team effort. And everyone, Colleen, Catherine, Vi, Amanda, Bill, all the volunteers, especially people like Dave and Marge, Michelle, our board, everybody stepped up. Our MP team, everybody stepped up and said, okay, how do we do this? How do we still be the best church we can be, a church that lives out our faith and our values, even at times like this? What a beautiful thing to celebrate. I think it is one thing that we're going to be talking a lot about for years to come, that we made it through all of this, that we are still here. And all of that's going to be what we need, I think, I hope, I pray, I trust. All of that's going to give us what we need to actually pivot and begin to ask those really tough questions of, what's post-pandemic church look like? Who is coming back? How do we be a church with all the different complexities and restrictions and complications that a post-pandemic world will have? What lessons about anti-racism are we going to bring with us? How do we exist both online and in person? And how do we make that fluid? How do we actually do a better job at being church? How do we use this as an opportunity to say, you know what, let's stop doing this and start doing this? Yeah, lots of big questions that we're going to need everybody's help on, and those are questions we'll talk about later on in the future. But I want this moment of celebration to be the fuel for all of that, to let us know that we can get through that, because guess what? We got through that, and that was just pure ridiculousness, right? Yeah, so much to celebrate. And so I want to hear from you. What things do you want to celebrate? Put your things in the comments. Send us an email. Let us know what you want to celebrate about being the church over the past 15 months. I know we all have lots of stuff, and I know there are things that I am not mentioning or even that I'm forgetting. So let us know. But thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for taking some time to celebrate with me.
I'd like to thank everyone who still continues to do church with us, whether it is Sunday morning and joining the pre-service coffee, and thank you to the volunteers for hosting that, or the Zoom, post-Zoom discussion questions. It's great. It's a sense of community, and I really appreciate that people are participating in that. And if you can't attend on that Sunday morning, then it's lovely that if you watch our recorded services. We really appreciate that. I'd also like to thank all the volunteers. So many people doing so much work in so many different ways. As Nick mentioned, there's been a huge outreach that's been spearheaded by Vi and Congregational Care. Hospitality has been busy making meals and putting together, bundles of food for people, as well as Congregational Care has been putting all kinds of meaningful things in those, whether it's, some books or articles to read or any of that. I'd also like to thank many of the volunteers that we don't see. So people like Dave Churchill, who is often at the church looking after the physical building and making sure things are done. And he's got a great team that work with him. One of the other groups I'd really like to thank is the board members. When we came on this board, I don't think we expected to be leading through a pandemic. None of us have done that. And so it's been a bit of a ride. It's been a bit of an interesting time. What I noticed is that we went sort of into just operational mode, looking at what do we need to do? Can we go back to live service? Can we not? If we do, what do we need to think about? Nick did a lot of the work, the background work, and figuring out what that would look like and what the restrictions would be. But all of the board members have been faced with decisions that we never thought we'd be making. And so I'd really like to show my appreciation to them. Thank you so much for sticking with us and working hard to keep the church open and active.
And I'm just going to jump in here because the video Benita made next actually didn't work for some reason. And she wanted to make sure that we thank our staff. Because the truth is, and I agree with her, we would not be here without our staff. Without Colleen, without Catherine, without Vi, Amanda, Antonina, without Bill. We would not be able to have all those celebrations that we just had. Because they are the people who helped us figure out how to be a church online. They are all the people who figured out, okay, how do we keep going? How do we navigate all these new intersections? How do we keep people connected? How do we care for them? What's going on inside them? How can we still connect with our kids? How can we use music this way? How do we run a church that isn't physically present but virtually present? What needs to be communicated? All these amazing things. How do we keep our building clean and safe? Oh, without them, I know we would not be here. And so again, to Colleen, to Catherine, to Vi, Amanda, Antonina, and Bill, thank you. Thank you. Let's all put in the comments a huge, huge thank you to all of them, because they are the ones that helped us get to where we are. And I know we would not be here without them and the volunteers and the board and everyone else that Benita thanked, and everyone, of course, that we didn't thank, because there are just too many to name. And so to all our staff, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hello, my name is Mike Jackson. I became treasurer of the church in March 2020, and I'm here to talk to you about the finances. It was suggested to me that since I haven't spoken to the community before, I should take a minute to introduce myself. By way of background, my wife Sally and I are both from Nova Scotia and still spend quite a bit of time there. We moved to Calgary in 1997 with our 3 children, and since then have been members of First Midlands United Church and now Red Deer Lake. By way of background, I graduated from Dalhousie University with a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Business Administration, and joined Scotiabank straight out of school. I was with Scotiabank for 32 years until 2016 when I retired. The first half of that was in corporate banking in Halifax, Toronto, and Calgary, and the second half was in investment banking in Calgary. In addition to the church, I presently sit on 3 other boards and serve as the chair of the audit and finance committees for all 3 of them. That's Crescent Point Energy Corp, SOS Children's Villages Canada, and Strathcona Tweedsmuir School Foundation. So that's a little bit of my background. Now I thought I'd talk about the church finances. There's a fairly good narrative and detailed information in the annual report that has been distributed, and there's a slide deck that accompanies this video, so I refer to both of those. The first thing to touch on is the government assistance we've received. So there's 2 programs. One is the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy Program, and we've qualified that for that every month starting in April 2020 and expected to go right through till September 2021. We've received or will receive a total of about $150,000 under CEWS. That has been very important in terms of enabling us to keep all our staff on and run the programs that Nick and Vi have talked about. The other form of government money we received is 2 grants totaling $40,000 for senior support. So Vi and Michelle have tapped into that, and that has gone to fund a lot of the congregational care and outreach programs that Vi has talked about. So that's a total of $190,000. I'm sorry, it's a total of $150,000, being $110 for CEWS and $40 for the senior support programs. In terms of our expenses, a lot of our expenses are relatively fixed, being the salaries and the building expenses. But where possible, we've been able to cut costs, particularly Dave Churchill has done a great job in looking after the building operating expenses and capital expenditures to keep those to a minimum. We were also able to go to Canadian Western Bank and negotiate with them a deferral of our mortgage. So we skipped 3 payments during 2020 and added those to the back end in 2030. That saved us some money. We are currently going to be seeing a little bit of price pressure in 2021. We've had some equipment that has either broken down or is obsolete. There's a couple laptops. Our phone system just gave out on us. We've had to replace those. We've also been benefited a long time from having a volunteer, Karen Norrie, be our bookkeeper. And after many years, Karen decided it was time for her to retire. We searched for another volunteer within the congregation, couldn't find anyone, and therefore have gone outside and hired a contracted bookkeeper, and that will be an added cost for us. In terms of revenue, during the building closure, which we're going to say started in March 2020, and we're assuming that the building will reopen in October 1st, 2021. That's just an assumption in our budget. We've lost all the fundraising revenue associated with that. So the On the Concert, Over the Edge concert series, the turkey supper last year, and the sale of wreaths and poinsettias all stopped during the building closure. So that adds up to about $60,000 that we've missed. The main source of revenue for the church is donations by individuals. And that's about 80% of our revenue. The majority of that comes by people donating on Sunday services and leaving envelopes. But with the Sunday service, we did not see a migration over to pre-authorized remittance. And we use a system called Moonclerk for PAR. And that meant a big dip once the building closed. And that's something that makes us quite vulnerable. I was talking with the treasurer of another United Church in Calgary a couple of weeks ago, and they have 80% of their congregants on PAR. So they've seen very little volatility with the building closure, whereas we've seen a big dip. The positive is that we did do an ask in November. So out of the chute, when the pandemic hit in March, April, we didn't want to be asking people for money. There was a shock. A lot of people were concerned about their finances, and it just wasn't the time to ask people to keep donating to the church. But come November, we did go out and ask those who were able to please help out, and we had a very positive response to that. In December, we figure our revenues were about $35,000 over what we would consider the normal level for a December. And that helped us end the year on a good note. So overall, for 2020, we broke even, which is a tremendous accomplishment. A lot of that had to do with cutting some costs, tapping into those subsidy and grant programs, and then the people responding to that request in December. So that made 2020, I consider it's quite tremendous that we broke even for the year. Now going into 2020, the church was in a good cash position. A big reason for that was that we benefited from two large estate plan gifts in 2018 and 2019, one of $55,000, one of $100,000. And we used that money to pay some of the capital expenditures and pay the principal on the mortgage. So we went into the 2020 in a good cash position. We broke even on cash during 2020. Hence, starting 2021, we're in a good cash position. Now, the budget assumptions for 2021, the major assumption is that the building is closed until October 1st, 2021. So that means the fundraising events, the Sunday service donations during that time period, those are all minimal until the building reopens. And then we assume everything is instantly back to norm on October 1st, which we know it probably won't be. It may take some time for people to start coming back or people to donating again. The budget for 2021 calls for a deficit of $103,000, which is a substantial amount. And we'll see, we're going to monitor, we always monitor the budget throughout the year. This year, we're going to monitor it even more. There could be some upside. For example, we recently applied for a grant from the province of Alberta that's helping churches reopen with reopening expenses. And we just received word that we were successful in that. So that's $4,700. There could be other things that come along where we could put a dent in that $103,000. We have not budgeted for another campaign or ask, but come later in the year, that's something that we will have to consider. The good news is that we started this in a good position. We treaded water through the pandemic, and the church financially will survive this pandemic. We did have some financial issues before the pandemic, being that we were running operating deficits because it does take a lot to run the building and we don't have a huge congregation. Those considerations, along with whatever the new norm is all bundled into the strategic planning that the board is currently doing. and things like making better use of the building by third-party rentals. We are looking at expanding the number of people in the congregation by tapping into some of the virtual avenues and community service that we're looking at now, and try to draw those people and they can help financially. So there's a lot of things going on in strategic planning, and financing is kind of one aspect of all of that. So that touches on the finances. Hopefully the information in the annual report and in the slide deck here, in which I've just gone through, answers a lot of your questions. I will also be a participant in Thursday's Zoom town hall. So if you do have additional questions, I'll try to answer them at that time. And thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this, and have a good day. Bye.
Hey friends, it is Nick again. Before we finish up with this video, I want to foreshadow a bit of what's going to happen later on this week, Wednesday especially, but also in the months to come. This video was meant to be mainly a chance for us to connect and lift up a lot of celebrations and a lot of gratitudes, because we have so many to give. And Wednesday, this coming Wednesday at 7 p.m., we're going to have a church-wide Zoom call where we can have a more intentional time of continuing that, but also asking the questions that you might have, of letting you in on some of the work that we are doing right now and preparing for that thing that we're going to be entering into. Because the reality is, as a church, we recognize that our world has shifted. We know that we are going to be entering into a new kind of world because we've seen economic, political, social, cultural, and spiritual shifts take place. And they've taken place for so long and have been so huge that we recognize there's no completely going back to what was, only entering into what's going to be. And some of it will be familiar and amazing and wonderful, but a lot of it is going to be new. A lot of it will be unfamiliar. And we have to ask really big and hard and important questions like, what's it look like to be a post-pandemic church? How do we exist online and in person? How can we actually use this as an opportunity to improve? What things can we bring with us? And what things should we say goodbye to? Who is coming back? Who do we need to welcome in? And how do we recommit to that work that we committed to doing a couple years ago? What does that look like here in this time and place? What kind of staff do we need? What kind of volunteers do we need? Do we need to change our whole governance structure in order to make this work happen? Or can we use the old one? A lot of big, important questions. And currently those are the questions that we're asking as a board. Those are the questions that are occupying my head and my heart. And to help us do that, because we know it's really essential work, we have hired Don McLeod. And Don is an Anglican priest, but also consultant. And his specialty is helping churches figure out new visions for new worlds. He's going to come in and work with our board and help us ask the right questions and help us make sure that we are having and building the right systems and structures so we can enter into whatever is next with our faith, our values, and our vision intact. And so I'm really proud of that decision the board made to bring him in. He's going to be such a joy to work with. We're going to learn so much from him. But I wanted to let you know that we are currently at work trying to figure all this out. Know that we're not just sitting back, but we have been rumbling and praying and working through this, trusting that God's going to help us through it all. But that's where our minds and hearts are at. And so on Wednesday, when we come together for our Zoom call, bring your questions, please. Bring your thoughts, bring your ideas, bring your support. And that's going to be a really important time for us to come together and just use that momentum that that celebration and gratitude created and help us step out into what's next together, knowing that we're going to do it together and knowing and trusting that God is with us and that God's not done with us yet. And so I'll prepare you just with this. A lot of the questions that you ask, we might say, we don't know. That's a good one. We're working on that. We actually haven't even thought about that one. Or here's kind of what we're suspecting. But we do want to use that as a time of coming together, of remembering that we are in this together, that we're actually working together, that we have the same vision in mind together, and step out together. Because that's how we do things, right? We do them together. We do them with the Spirit, knowing that if we do things together and with the Spirit, yeah, we'll be okay. We'll be okay. We'll still be here in 5, 10, 20, 50 years. And so please join us Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. The link is in the description below. And thank you so much for doing this with us. Oh, it was so good to connect with you. It was so good to celebrate and give up some gratitudes with you. Keep putting yours in the comment section. I'd love to see them, or even email them. Tweet, text, I don't know. Just get them out there. It's important that we name those things. But we will see you Wednesday, 7 o'clock on the Zoom call. And until then, may grace and peace be with you.